Hello, welcome to this video, and on this video I will be going through 10 essential jazz rock albums. These aren't ranked, and they're not the albums that I would put on the objective list of the 10 greatest jazz rock albums of all time. Every time I do one of these lists, there's certain albums, for example this one here, if I was doing the 10 greatest jazz rock albums of all time, this album would have to be on the list because this is an undeniable classic by Stanley Clarke, Stanley Clarke's greatest album. It features a one-off lineup of Stanley Clarke on electric bass and acoustic bass, Jan Hammer on Moog, electric piano, organ and acoustic piano, Tony Williams on drums, and Bill Connors on electric guitar. And this is a classic jazz rock album. But there's certain jazz rock albums that don't ever quite make the list, and yet they are my favourite jazz rock albums. They're usually more my personal choice. So what I've done is I've come up with 10 essential jazz rock albums, and I'm going to tell you about them right now. So shall we kick in straight away? Well, the first one I've got is and I haven't put them in order down. I've got them all down here. So the first one I'm going to kick it off with is a safe choice, and it is Tail Spinning. If I sound a bit lurgified, as we say here in the UK, it's because I am. I've been in bed for 3 days, and I wasn't going to make this video, but I've just got up and had a packet of prawn cocktail crisps and orange juice, and I suddenly felt better. Now I'm in here, I don't know how I do, but we'll see how it goes. So I'm a bit under the weather here, but we have to keep the show on the road. So here we have, from 1975, I think, Tail Spinning by Weather Report. Yes, I got the date right. Okay, this one never gets mentioned, does it? People will mention Heavy Weather, they'll mention Black Market, they may mention 8:30, or the first one, Weather Report. You know, there's all these different ones they talk about, and they never mention this one. So what is this one? Well, this was made, right, between, I would say, the first incarnation, which is a sort of spacey electric jazz, quite experimental version of the band. And then on Sweet Nighter, they start to bring in a funkier sound. And then we move towards the real classics of Black Market and Heavy Weather. And this is in between those. So what's so special about this? This is the most burning Weather Report album. If you're into jazz rock and you find Weather Report's approach that everyone solos and nobody solo can be a bit infuriating, which I do, I like a good solo. I want to hear someone burn. I want to hear them start and keep playing until the end. That's what I want. And on here, they deliver it. The lineup is mind-blowing. We have on this album, I don't need to look it up, but I will. We've got Joe Zawinul, of course, on keyboards, Wayne Shorter, of course, on saxophone, and I think Lyricon on here. We've got Aliro Lima on percussion, Alfonso Johnson on bass, absolutely incredible bass playing, very underrated bass player, I think. And the great Leon Chancellor on drums, who is one of the great fusion drummers of the 70s. In terms of fusion, he's playing on George Duke's albums are essential. And then he went on to play with, I think, Michael Jackson. There they are. He's the one on the left. And so this is the only album with Ndugu on. He's doing a session job. There's three tracks per side. Man in the Green Suit, Lusitanos Between the Thighs, Badia, which is one of the famous tracks off here, Freezing Fire, and 5 short stories. The burning one is Between the Thighs. And I cannot believe that there is a Weather Report track called Between the Thighs. What were they thinking? So that's the first one I've got on my list, essential jazz rock listening. And you know the sort of jazz rock we deal with on this channel. No namby-pamby fusion, no airy-fairy spaciness, although there's a little bit in here. We're talking about burning jazz rock, funky grooves, heaviness, lots of soloing, and people taking it to another place. Right, and so I was watching Tim Barnes, who I also drum for at the moment, so I must say that, and Stephen Wilson on their Album Years podcast, and they were talking about Miles Davis in the 1980s, and they really put down his 1986 album, or 1985 album, sorry, You're Under Arrest. And I actually put that on the list. I thought, yeah, but it's not an essential jazz rock. I'm only putting this on so I can, argue its case. I thought, so 80s Miles Davis sometimes gets maligned. I think he was one of the great jazz rock musicians of the 1980s. Of course he was. And some of his albums in the 1980s are actually more focused than some of the long-winded, Eternal Now funk of the 1970s. And there's some absolutely brilliant albums. Aura is the greatest album that he did from the 1980s. But this one here is also a magnificent album from Miles Davis. And when we say album, we mean double album. This is a double live album. So Miles returned to the scene in 1981 with a new band full of young jazz rock hopefuls, which went on to become absolute legends. People like Marcus Miller, Bill Evans, Mike Stern. The first album, Man with the Horn, it's a funny album. It contains my favourite guitar solo in the history of mankind, which is the guitar solo that Mike Stern does on Fat Time. But it's also a bit lame in places as Miles tries to find his feet. Later on that year, there was a comeback and he did a couple of gigs, and these are the recordings of the gigs. This is on fire, right? Now, Miles is a little bit weak, but often when we listen to Miles Davis on an album, it's not actually his trumpet playing. Sometimes we listen to the way he controls young, talented jazz musicians. The lineup on here is something else. So on here, we've got Miles Davis, of course, on trumpet, Marcus Miller on bass, Bill Evans on soprano saxophone, Mike Stern on guitar, Al Foster on drums, and Mino Sinelu on percussion. Look at this, and there you can see that lovely panoramic picture of them playing live. A young Marcus Miller there, who is probably around about 22 years old there. The standout musician on here is Mike Stern. Now, Mike Stern, as time has gone on, is now one of the sort of great, fusion guitarists of all time. And he's a very considered, very apt and able guitar player. And a brilliant jazz guitarist. Back then, right, he's young, he's off his face, and Miles is pushing him to play like Jimi Hendrix. So what we have on here is some of the greatest jazz rock guitaring ever, and some of the greatest bass playing. But Mike Stern is incredible. His guitar tone is so full and in your face, and it's like some insane cross between, I don't know, Freddie King and Ornette Coleman. It's all over the place. This is one of my favourite Miles Davis albums. Look at that. All yellow as well, which I think is the right colour for this. This came out in 1982, so that's my second album. What have I got as my third album? I've gone for a lot of 80s albums because I know that when I look at the sort of classic jazz rock albums, I'm always going to be going back to the 70s. So I've given the 80s a bit of love on this list. Now, these are all essential jazz rock albums. These aren't sort of quite good. These are ones that you have to have if you've got to listen to them. And this one is from early 80s. I think it's from about 1982, is it? Yes, recorded in 1982. And it is Steve Kahn, Modern Times. Now, Steve Kahn is a great guitar player. We know him from the Brecker Brothers. He also did some duo stuff with Larry Coryell. I've got a lot of his solo albums like Blue Man. They contain his incredible compositional skills. He's a very good composer, a brilliant guitarist. But those albums, like Tightrope, they're great, but they do very, very slightly towards the fuse. Like only a smidge. Steve's only goes over a smidge. This one, Modern Times, right, is full out. They are playing and they're on fire. The lineup, it's a power trio. We've basically got Anthony Jackson on bass, the great Anthony Jackson, as great as he ever was. We've got the incredible Steve Jordan on drums, back when he was a jazz rock fusion drummer, before he'd taken the dollar from those OAP rock gods, the Rolling Stones. Oh yeah, and of course it's not a trio because we've got a Manolo Badrina on percussion, who previously played on the classic Heavy Weather by Weather Report. Right, this is a live album. Feels like I've got two albums in here. No, I haven't. It's just a nice pressing because it's nice and fat. Shall I pull it out? This is quite hard to get hold of, you know. I think it was a Japanese only release. There's lots of Japanese nomenclature on here. So this, of course, you can go on YouTube and listen to it now. Oh yes, you see, look at that. This is the Japanese import that I got. There, I knew it. Right, what's this like? It's on fire. It's not like his solo 70s stuff, right? It sounds like the Police playing jazz rock fusion. The Police with no singing, right? And they're just playing. That's what it sounds like. There's a certain immediacy about this, a certain new waveness about this that you don't really ever hear in jazz rock. It's tight and controlled, and of course, because it's live, it's burning. The last track, which is called Modern Times, is credited to Khan, Jackson, Jordan, Bergina. That's a 10-minute jam, full-on jam. This is a classic album, right? And look at Steve Jordan there. Looks exactly the same as he does now. He was hanging out with the Living Colour guys the other night, and Will Calhoun put it up on Facebook. Now, the Living Colour guys look good. They look really good. But they're like 10 years younger than Steve Jordan. But Steve Jordan looks exactly the same. Right. Another 80s jazz rock album. Essential jazz rock album, but a troublesome one. Allan Holdsworth, Road Games. Now, why is this a troublesome album? For a start, it's not actually an album, is it? It's a mini album, whatever that is. Look, can you see it there? Specially priced mini album, right? This came out on Warner Brothers in about 1984, I would say, something like 85, something like that, around about the same time as Metal Fatigue. I cannot see a date on it, but oh, come on, where's the date on here? '93. Rubbish, Andy. So, Allan Holdsworth, greatest guitarist that ever lived. But a man of principle, or you could say a fool. Because when offered a major deal and offered the chance of having Eddie Van Halen producing it, which this album would have then turned into an absolute rock god, a millionaire, able to do whatever he wanted for the rest of his career, he didn't like it because he didn't like his creativity curtailed in any way. He was not into commercial compromise. And so there was a lot of issues with this album, and it never got done, right? This album then, no, you can't do it. I'm doing this. I'm in another YouTube video, please.
The pizza is black.
All right, well, there's no point telling me about the pizza being black, Grace. This is going to be on the internet, all right? So go away. I'm not very well, so my daughter's hungry. So I get out of bed and I crawl to the shop, just about making it there, right? And then I buy them the pizza. I bring the pizza back knowing that I can now not worry about them because they will make their pizza whilst I do my YouTube video that I might just get through without dying. And they burnt the bloody pizza, right? This is real life coming in, right? Now, if you look at this album cover, this does look pizza-esque, doesn't it? So to get back with the story with this one, right? There's a lot of compromise. They brought in Ted Templeman, who was Van Halen's producer, to produce it. Alan didn't like it. He got all upset, and they eventually got it done. But Alan had had enough by then, and he went off and signed a deal with some other tiny little label where he could do what he wanted, and nobody would ever hear it because the distribution wasn't good enough. And he would carry on playing around the world to like 20 people. And it's a shame. But this, despite Alan's protestations, exactly the same with the album that he disowned, his first solo album, Velvet Darkness, right? This is a wonderful album, and it benefits from having a proper producer and a major label deal because it sounds absolutely beautiful, and it has an incredible lineup on it of Allan Holdsworth on the guitar, Jeff Berlin on bass, and Chad Wackerman on drums. That's the basic band. And then we've got special guests of Jack Bruce on vocals, And Paul Williams, who was from the IOU band, on lead vocals on Road Games. We've also got Paul Corder on here and Joe Turano. This has always been one of my favourite Alan Holdsworth albums. And this is back when he was flirting with vocals. And I know people have a problem, but for me, when Alan has vocals, it pushes it beyond the jazz rock into its own world. It sort of becomes a little bit more proggy, actually, but it's his own world. And I actually find his lyrics absolutely fascinating. Listen to the lyrics. I don't know who writes the lyrics on these albums. It doesn't say, does it? I don't know anything, do I? Does it say on the writing credits? I've never really thought about this. But if you listen to Metal Fatigue, some of those lyrics are brilliant. See, it just says Paul Williams. Right, so Paul Williams wrote the lyrics. The late, great Paul Williams from the IOU band. Right, who had previously been the singer in Tempest. Oh my God, I'm dying. Shall we just move on? That's a brilliant album. And his solo on Tokyo Dream, one of his greatest solos of all time. Let's stick that over here. Right, this is a classic jazz rock album. You have to own it if you're a jazz rock fan. And it is. Ba-da-da, bam! Lenny White. Big City. The follow-up to Venusian Summer. Now, Venusian Summer is the classic Lenny White album. Now, if we take all the Return to Forever albums, and then we put the Al Di Meola ones in there, and the Stanley Clarke ones in there, and the Chick Corea solo albums that are made at the same time with them, so, you know, there's a whole raft of these sort of Return to Forever albums. There's a whole raft of them. I might do a video where we go through the lot, all right? The greatest one is Lenny White's Venusian Summer, right? It's just unbelievable. And it contains on there one of the most incredible guitar solos of all time in jazz rock, which is the guitar solo on Mating Drive that Ray Gomez performs. Lenny White followed it up with this album, and this is also an utter masterpiece. Not quite in the same bracket as Venusian Summer, but pretty close to it. And the lineup is unbelievable, right? If you're a jazz rock fan and you haven't heard this, you need to go and listen to this album. So it opens up with Big City. And Big City is Lenny White plus the Tower of Power horn section plus Brian Auger's Oblivion Express, all in one massive band playing what you would expect the Oblivion Express, you know, Tower of Power and Lenny White to do, which is a very funky track. I think it's got because it's got what's the name on vocals, hasn't it? It says Alex Ligertwood, who the guitar, but I always felt that he's got, maybe it hasn't. But there's definitely vocals on the next track up, which is Sweet Dreamer, which is like a beautiful ballad. It says a song with a message. Linda Tillery on vocals on this one, but we also got Lenny White on drums, obviously Herbie Hancock on keyboards, the great Ray Gomez on guitars, Paul Jackson on bass, my favourite bass player of all time, and Pat Gleason on EMU synthesizer. So we've kicked off, and so far this is the lineup on the first two tracks. Lenny White, Lenny Pickett, Emily Castillo, Steve Kupka, Mick Gillette, Greg Adams, Brian Auger, Alice Ligertwood, Jack Mills, Clive Chayman, Lennox Langton, Herbie Hancock, Linda Tillery, Ray Gomez, Paul Jackson, Pat Gleason, right? Then there's a 1 minute interlude called Egypt, which is Lenny White jamming with, it must be a 17 or 18-year-old Marcus Miller on what's called weird bass. And then we get an orchestral little thing called Nocturne that Lenny White wrote. It's orchestrated by Mike Gibbs, the great jazz rock arranger and orchestrator. And then we have a track called Rapid Transit, the follow-up, I think, to Mating Drive, which is written by Ray Gomez. And it's got Herbie Hancock, Lenny White, Ray Gomez, Verdine White from Earth, Wind and Fire on bass, and he's bloody funky, and Pat Gleason on harp string ensemble. And Ray Gomez is just off the planet. It really is. And then this album, this side finishes up with Ritmo Loco, which is a 1 minute track by Lenny White, where he's playing all percussion and drums and rotor toms. That's the incredible side. They're not going to be able to beat it on side two. So you turn it over onto side two, and you get a sort of Hendrixy type track, which features Lenny White on drums, Onajay Allen Gums on acoustic piano, Alex Blake on bass, who'd played bass previously in Billy Cobham's band. And then Neil Schon and Ray Gomez doing their best Hendrix impersonations. It's unbelievable, right? Then the big jazz rock epic comes on, called The Enchanted Pool Suite, which is in 3 parts. It features a full orchestra. This is just when they had the budgets. It's just jaw-dropping. And you want to hear the lineup on this. It is Jerry Goodman on violin, Jan Hammer on acoustic piano and Moog synth, Pat Gleason on EMU synthesizer, Miroslav Vitous on acoustic bass, Mike Gibbs on acoustic piano. We've got Lois Collin on harp. We've got Dave Earl Johnson on congas, right? This is insane. It's Lenny White with 2/5 of the Mahavishnu Orchestra, augmented by Miroslav Vitous on bass. It's like this sort of dream lineup, and it's full on. It's incredible. The whole thing is about 10-15 minutes long, and then it finishes with another sort of Hendrixy track, a sort of swingy Jack Johnson type track called And We Meet again featuring Neil Schon and Ray Gomez. This is an utter classic, and you have to have it. 80s fusion, like we've said, you know, I've been focusing on it a little bit today, but it can be a bit rubbish, can't it? There's a few people that were good. Scott Henderson was good with Tribal Tech, wasn't he? He was good. Like Miles did some good albums, and nobody wants to admit it, but he did. We got Chick Corea's Electric Band, but did I say that right? Chick Corea's Electric Band. But, you know, they can be a bit Fusacky. But there was one guy that didn't let you down in the 1980s. It was John Scofield. Perhaps a touch too much chorus on his guitar at times, but he delivered the goods. And on albums like Loud Jazz and Blue Matter and Pick Hits Live, they're the albums you've got to go to. Classic jazz rock albums, right? And then he went and started doing some proper jazz, you know, and you got in like Joe Henderson on sax. That's all brilliant. And he was up and going, and then from then on he was brilliant. But were there any other classic jazz rock albums? There was! There was this one! This is amazing. This is the best one. And it features, again, a lineup that we never saw again. This is a Scofield band. Instead of having Dennis Chambers and Gary Granger, this one is John Scofield on guitar, Don Grolnick from the Brecker Brothers on keyboards, and then Dowell Jones on bass and Omar Hakim on drums. It's basically the same band that Sting had, sort of, when he did The Dream of the Blue Turtles. And this is absolutely brilliant. It doesn't suffer from 80s production, but it doesn't sound like 70s production either. It's got a certain dark and warm sound to it, to be honest. Tracks on here: Techno, Still Warm, High and Mighty, Protocol, and then Rule of Thumb, Pick and Pans, and then Gilby 643. On here, Techno's incredible, Still Warm's incredible, and my favourite Scofield track of all time, Protocol, which is just driving and chromatic and all over the place. That is an amazing jazz rock album, you know, so go and check it out if you don't know it. Incredible cover. Scofield looks cool and moody. I just don't like that there. Why did they do things like that in the 80s? You know, what's that called? A Chomp Doyle or whatever it is. It's supposed to, you know, what am I supposed to think? You know, he's got this beautiful, dark, moody black and white picture. Think, oh my God, it's peeled back here. It's peeled its under yellow belly. Oh no, it's Tromp Doyle. Is that the name? Tromp, you know, that's the name for it. They done it again here. Bloody 80s. Right. If I was going to do this list, Spectrum by Billy Cobham would be on there, of course. But then we got Crosswinds, which is incredible. We got Total Eclipse, which is incredible. Funky Thydum, all these albums are incredible, right? But as that decade progresses, Billy Cobham does go from playing very intense jazz rock, especially on Total Eclipse, which is full on. He starts to work towards the funk, and before you know it, you can't tell the difference between him and the Brecker Brothers, can you? No, that's not true, because he did this one, didn't he? He did that one. Billy Cobham, Life and Times. That's Billy's hand holding a picture of him when he was little. Looks like he's in prison. He looks like he's in child prison, but he's playing a ukulele. He's like a tiny little lead belly trying to get out of prison by playing his way out. It's not going to happen, Billy. This is an incredible, fiery album, right? The lineup is pretty mind-blowing. Um, Billy Cobham on drums, although it says percussion. John Schofield on guitar, and he plays. It doesn't sound like Schofield; it sounds more like John McLaughlin. And it has Dwilly Gonga on keyboards, which of course is George Duke. He's combined back with George Duke again, brilliant. And then the late great Doug Rausch on bass. If you don't know who Doug Rausch was a bass player that emerged in Santana in the early 70s. He then went on to do sessions with all sorts of different people, with Lenny White. He played with, who else? Al Di Meola, I think. And he was the guy for a short amount of time. And he invented this technique, double thumbing technique, that Victor Wooten's got famous for. But he was doing this in the 1970s, and you get this incredibly fast pummeling bass from Doug Rausch. He looked incredible. He'd got this massive big hair. He had drug problems. And in 1978, he had an overdose and died. And so now he never gets mentioned. But, you know, if you can find a jazz rock fusion album with Doug Rausch on, it's essential. We got the great Richard Davis on bass on Siesta. He's playing acoustic bass, the same guy that played double bass on Astral Weeks by Van Morrison. Sorry. God. To go from that to this proper album. We got Alan Zavard on organ, who went on to play with Jean-Luc Ponty and then ended up in the Frank Zappa band and died a few years ago, I think, from a brain tumour, I think. Incredible classically trained player. Phil Bodner on bass, clarinet and flute. And then Gene Orloff on violin, Al Brown on viola, and Kermit Moore on cello on the track Siesta. Siesta is like, it's got two parts to it. It's like, well, no, it's got two parts to it. The first part called Siesta, and then there's a bit called Wake Up, That's What You Said, and it's 4 seconds long. I can't remember what that bit is. Anyway, this is a fantastic album. Absolutely brilliant. Look at that, the Atlantic Group. Original copy. I thought it was. Right, let's move on. What number are we on? Does it really matter? I'm going to go with this one next. Ooh, what's that, I hear you ask? Bill Laswell, bass lines. Bill Laswell is one of my favourite musicians, and he's not very well at the moment. And I've done videos about him on here. I hope he's doing all right. Bill Laswell's an absolute genius, one of the most important musicians of the 20th century, as far as I'm concerned. He's known as a producer. He's produced Mick Jagger. He's produced Motorhead, Iggy Pop. He produced album for John Lydon's Public Image Limited, which is one of the greatest albums of the 1980s. And he had a sort of experimental, Ornette Coleman-esque, hip-hop influenced jazz rock group in the 80s called Material, one of my favourite bands. And in the early 80s, on Electric Musician, he did this solo album called Basslines. There's Laswell there. And this is just absolutely incredible. And what it explores is this sort of post-Ornette Coleman harmonic approach to jazz rock, combined with a sort of cut-up, hip-hop derived sensibility in the production. Laswell had worked with Brian Eno and David Byrne on My Life in a Bush of Ghosts just before this, and then went on to, of course, create, produce and write and do virtually everything on Rocket by Herbie Hancock. This does not sound like Rocket. It's incredible. It's if you like Material, it's basically Material's best album, and I love Material. Memory serves, I nearly pulled that one out, but this one is the album. It has got Bill Laswell on Steinberger bass, Fender fretless bass, Precision bass, Music Man Stingray bass, Fender 6-string bass, and Ibanez 8-string bass. Laswell is an incredible bass player, as well as being an incredible producer and an incredible imaginer of new music. We've got Michael Beinhorn on keyboards, although I don't think he was really a keyboardist. There's an incredible interview on Rick Beato with Michael Beinhorn, because he went on, after he left this group and doing all this avant-garde weirdness, to produce the Red Hot Chili Peppers and I think Pearl Jam and maybe even Soundgarden. And he became one of the great producers, and it's a fascinating interview, and he talks about this period. We have the legend that is Ronald Shannon Jackson on drums, one of my favourite drummers, perhaps the greatest of the harmonic drummers that ever lived. I'm friends with Calvin Weston on Facebook, and I've interviewed him on the channel. So sorry, Calvin, I'm sure you agree. Ronald Shannon Jackson was just a beast. He was an absolute god of the drums and a huge influence on me. We've got George Lewis on trombone, Ralph Carney on bass saxophone and contrabass clarinet. We've got the incredible Fred Frith from Henry Cow on guitar. I know Fred Frith from his work with Zorn, and most particularly with his work with Material, not Henry Cow. Daniel Ponce on percussion, Martin Beasy on percussion, David Moss on voice and sound effects. And then there's Philip Wilson crops up on drums on 2, which is a track called Work Song, which is actually very funky. This is a jazz rock album, but it's different to your standard jazz rock albums, and it's great, and it's got some incredible stuff on it. Right, Jeff Beck, one of the biggest selling jazz rock artists of the 70s, someone who brought jazz rock to the mainstream. You know, he made 2 incredible jazz rock albums that have gone down as classics, Blow by Blow and Wired. I recently did a video where I talked about the live album he did with Jan Hammer. Right, but there's one other album, and it never gets mentioned, and it is, of course, this one, There and Back, Jeff Beck. There and Back. And this is just a masterpiece, isn't it? Okay. Any people in the UK who remembers the Tube and that funky tune that opened up the Tube, that was called Star Cycle, and it was written by Jan Hammer, and it was off this album. And that track is basically Jeff Beck on guitar, and then everything else, which is basically keyboards and drums, is Jan. That drum beat's incredible. Jan Hammer is off the scale on this. You know I love Jan Hammer. This is essentially Jan Hammer. And then we got Too Much to Lose. You're going to hear about that tune in a minute. I've got this twice on the list, and I've only just realised it. So that might give you a clue. If you know, put it in the comments now what's going to be the last one, number 10. You never knew. Absolutely brilliant. And on these tracks, we have sometimes Mo Foster on bass. The late, great Mo Foster, he died a few years back. Tony Hymas on keyboards that cropped up later on the Hymas Bozio Guitar Shop album. But Tony Hymas also had a fusion band in the 90s with Terry Bozzio and Tony Coe called the Lonely Bears, and that is essential, incredible stuff. And this side one finishes with The Pump, which is slow and deliberate. There's a minimalism to this album that is coming from the 1980s. It sounds incredible. Simon Phillips is off the scale. Simon Phillips is undeniably one of the greatest drummers that's ever lived. He's one of my favourite drummers of all time. On side 2, we get El Becco, The Golden Road, and then we get Space Boogie. And Space Boogie is just this ferocious tune. Is it in 9? Because it's in 7. That's incredible. I've got a story about Space Boogie, which is quite fun. In 2000, I did a drum clinic tour with Simon Phillips, and it was very exciting because he was one of my heroes. And we toured right down from Southend, which is right in the south of the UK, all the way up to Glasgow, where we did the last clinic. And the last clinic was in a hotel, and we were doing the clinic in the hotel. So we arrived, set the drums up, then we went to bed, and the next day we were going to do the clinic. So my kit was set downstairs in this room next to Simon Phillips. I couldn't sleep, so I toddled down there to go and have a look on my own, to go and have a look at my drum kit. And I check it's all right, and I have a bit of a practice. Then I look round and I see Simon Phillips's huge green 100,000 quid Tama Superstar drum kit, right? A drum kit that I've been looking at since I was about 12 years old and wanted to covet. Simon Phillips's drum kit. It's there for the taking. There's nobody there. Go on, Andy, just go and jump on it and have a play. Oh, I couldn't do that. It's not mine. That's Simon Phillips, and I haven't asked his permission. He wouldn't mind, not Simon. He's a nice guy. He wouldn't mind you playing his drums. You can play the drums. You're not going to do it any harm. I know, but I haven't asked him, and you know it's a bit cheeky. And then when I see him, I'll have to keep it a secret, and I'll have a secret with Simon. Then I have to like keep that secret from. It doesn't matter if you have a secret from Simon Phillips. We've all got secrets. We all carry our secrets, and it'll be worth it for the enjoyment of you getting on that kit and playing Space Boogie. Right? You learnt it when you were as a kid. It seemed so hard, and you couldn't, when you worked it out, you got all that double bass drum and all that little left hand coming to fill. You got it all down, and there's Simon Phillips' kit. It's there. You could go and play Space Boogie on it now. You know, you are right, and I did do the work, didn't I? I did do the work, and if I did the work, I deserve it. You do deserve it, Andy. I think you do. I do, don't I? Yes, you do. Get on that kit. Simon's not here. Nobody's here. It's the middle of the night. There's nobody around in this bit. No one's going to hear it. Get on the kit. So I creep over and I jump onto Simon Phillips' kit, and there I go. And I'm playing it, and I'm on his kit, and I look up, and Simon's smaller than me. He's actually quite small. And this kit's up so high, I'm playing like this because he's got proper technique. I can remember thinking, he's got proper technique. This is why the drums are so high. And I'm playing it, trying to get around these toms. There's about 100 million toms, you know. It's like walking to the beach on a British holiday. You know that thing when you come down, you put your towels on, and then you put you change your trousers, you know, and all that bit, and then you're on the beach, and then you go, right, I'll go and I'll get in the sea now. Do you want to come? Yeah, I'll come with you. So you stand and you start doing that walk across the sand, and it goes on for hours. That's like what it's like doing a fill round Simon's kids. And it's all set up for open hands and a higher. Anyway, it's all stuck in my brain. I'm sat there in Glasgow. I'm doing myself, thinks I'm not well. The adrenaline's coming. Calm it down, Andy. You're going to do yourself a mischief. So I'm sat there doing my Space Boogie. Then out of nowhere, the identical beat just starts up. I look round. Simon's on my drum kit doing the same beat, laughing his head off. He didn't mind. He'd done exactly the same thing. Couldn't get sleep. Got down, bored. Told me to carry on, and I had a little jam. I jammed with Simon Phillips on his kit. Knacking myself out. Right. This isn't ranked, but if it was, this would be number one of the greatest albums ever made. Melodies. I like having this here because, you know, when I have it come up, normally I do it digitally, don't I? And the thing just sort of goes, zzz, and it's there like that in the background, all neat and parallel with the edges of the screen. But here I can get more drama into the video by the way that I place it like that. Let's try it again. So, I haven't ranked this list, but if I were to rank it, this one would be number one. Melodies, Jan Hammer. One of the greatest albums ever made. In 1977, Jan Hammer had left the Mahavishnu Orchestra and formed his own jazz rock group called the Jan Hammer Group. Not the most imaginative title, but it did say what it did. It was the Jan Hammer Group. And so it was a good way of knowing which group was his because he named it after himself, which I thought was quite useful and showed a bit of care, but in the end seems a little bit unnecessary. And after being in the Mahavishnu Orchestra, the fact they got returned to Forever and the 11th House, you know, you would have thought he would have called it something like Coils of Wisdom or something like that, you know. Anyway, so we have the Jan Hammer Group here, and they don't seem to quite have the success of the Mahavishnu Orchestra, and they stand up and say, maybe this jazz rock thing's, you know, ran out. There we are playing in, you know, we sat there playing in 2116 time, which they did actually do on the album previous. Oh yeah, one of the greatest jazz rock albums ever made, which is the one I always put up, which is why I don't mention this one. How about, and when they went there, signed to Emperor, this is on the Emperor Records, right? And I can imagine Jan Hammer saying to the rest of the band, how about, on the next album, we all write a pop song each and we sing it? Yeah, but Jan, none of us are singers. Doesn't matter. We'll all sing on it. What do you mean, take turns? Yep, we'll take turns. What, on a proper album with a deal? Yep, that's what we'll do. It'll be brilliant. What about all the soloing, the stuff we could have? None of that. Just write some pop songs. Some good melodies. In fact, we'll call it melodies. That's what it'll be. Melodies. And I've commissioned the worst cover ever that will not sell this album in any way, shape or form. These horrible sort of, looks like it should be on a film like some dystopian science fiction film, not some album that is trying to sell the idea of doing pop songs, you know, by a jazz rock fusion band, which is a bad idea anyway and it's never going to work. But it'll be brilliant. So they all went away. Tony Smith, the drummer, Stephen Kindler, the violinist, and Fernando Saunders, they all went off home and they all wrote a song, didn't they? They wrote a song. Jan wrote most of the song because it was his band. In fact, I'll tell you. Jan wrote 1, 2. Oh, hang on, I'm getting confused now. 1. They didn't write the. Right. Let's go through the songs on this and work it out, because I've never thought about this before. It's quite interesting because I want to see how much Jan Hammer allowed them to put their songs on this one. So, the first album is Too Much to Lose. We heard it in instrumental form on There and Back, but here it is with a vocal. And you know who's singing the vocal on this? The lead vocal is sang by Tony Smith, the great Tony Smith on drums. Tony, I've got this song called Too Much to Lose. Oh, yeah. Do you want to sing it for? Yeah, I don't mind that. And drum. Yeah, easy. Right, so that's what we get, great song. And then we get one of the greatest tunes ever written, which is Peaceful Sundown. Who's singing on that? It's Tony Smith again. Fernando Saunders having a go. They're the only three on it. You've got Jan Hammer doing everything. And then you've got Tony Smith on drums and Fernando Saunders on bass and vocals. But I'm sure Jan Hammer was on drums on this one because there's 2 drummers on this track. This is absolutely incredible. This track starts up, beautiful tune. It starts off all over in the one side of the stereo spectrum and it toddles on like this. Sounds great. And then suddenly Jan launches into this incredible keyboard solo and the whole thing opens up. Incredible. Then we have I Sing, which is written by Fernando Saunders. Now, you'd think Fernando Saunders would write something funky, but he doesn't. He writes this weird acoustic-y, Mahavishnu thing, but with vocals. I'll read you the lyrics to this one. You go, I'll stay. She's gone, I stay. Singing a song, my love is gone, I sing, and I play. Is it true or a game? And of course, that's with Fernando Saunders singing. All the vocals are great on here, by the way. And then we get Honey 5379. And that one's written by Fernando Saunders, Tony Smith, and Jan Hammer. It's obviously a jam. And it's damn funky, that one is. It's got an incredible bass line from Fernando Saunders. You can tell I love this album. Every single track is one of my favourite albums of all time. And then we get Window of Love, which is written by Jan Hammer. The words are by Stephen Kindler. All right. On this, everything is by Jan Hammer, except for the vocal, which of course is Tony Smith. He got the vast amount of the vocal duties. Then we get What It Is, another funky track, which I'm going to guess is Fernando Saunders again. No, it's Tony Smith. It's Tony Smith's turn now to be funky. That is a funky track. Who's singing? It's Tony Smith. Right, then you kick it over and it opens up with a track called Don't You Know, which is only 2 minutes and 58 seconds long. It's one of the greatest tunes ever written. I would put it in my 5 favourite tunes of all time. It's a jazz rock tune, but it's not. It's catchy. It's not got any soloing really, but there's no other track that sounds like it. It sounds like from another time and space. Don't You Know, off Melodies by Jan Hammer is incredible, right? And believe it or not, Fernando Saunders is singing on that, not Tony Smith. Then you get Just for Fun, and this is like a joke track where they take the mickey about what they're doing, and they go on about the very facts of the situation they're in. This is how I know the background to this album. I didn't just make it up. I learnt it by studying the lyrics to this tune. I'll read you the lyrics now. People tell us what we play cannot sell and will not pay. I've been told that all my life. They say you must fit into a mould if you want to be as good as gold. That's a terrible lyric. Who did the lyrics on this? Stephen Kindler. Sorry, Stephen. He's on my Facebook page as well. And he sent me a few messages. But using the word mould is just not... You shouldn't do that in a song. And then rhymed it with gold is terrible. Then he goes into a bridge. And so we had to concentrate on how to make the song relate. Now's the time to set it straight. We cannot overcomplicate the ... And then he doesn't follow it. He says, so we'll satisfy everyone and write our music just for fun. Right, so that tells you what they were trying to do on this album. Stephen Kindler's giving the game away. Then we get an instrumental, which is by Stephen Kindler, the one instrumental on the track, which is called Hyperspace. Absolutely incredible. Then you get another masterpiece. Who Are They? Right? Now, this one is directed at John McLaughlin, without a doubt. This is the thing when you get a jazz rock album with lyrics on, you can start to get a bit more meaning out of it. Right, so Jan Hammer and Jerry Goodman were not followers of Sri Chinmoy. They weren't even religious, and they didn't like it. There was a schism between the band. You know, I think Billy Cobb was off doing his own thing. Rick Laird and John were quite spiritual. But Jerry Goodman and Jan Hammer, they were only young guys. They probably wanted to go out and get drunk and have a good time and, you know, try and chat up girls. And John was walking around in his white, you know, being all pious. And he'd done all that in the 1960s. He shouldn't have let them have their fun, but they wouldn't have their fun. And so there was a problem there, you know. So they went off and had their fun, you know. And as it says here, just for fun. That's what this album's about. It's about fun. It's not about, you know, Sri Chinmoy and all this bit, you know, and doing all that. This is about fun. This one is directed at John McLaughlin. I know it. Probably not. I shouldn't say that. I'll probably get done. But I think it is. But it's probably not. Anyway, I'll read it out to you. Mayday. Who are they? Where do they get the clouds of must believe? Who are they? Are they to say, this is the way it is, believe or perish? They are here to pray. And that's pray as in like a praying mantis. Oh no, praying mantis is actually praying, isn't it? I always thought a praying mantis is a mantis that preys on things, but it's not, it's actually praying. But they use it in the way of praying on things like a praying mantis actually does. Not the fact that it looks like it's praying, which is the thing it doesn't do. They are here to pray. They'll never tell me what I need to know. We are on our own. Our souls are free and we are here to stay. So a little bit of a sort of a metaphysical thought there from Jan on here. And there's an instrumental at the end, which is piano and violin. Absolutely beautiful. This really is one of the greatest albums I've ever made. On paper, it shouldn't be, but they pull it off. And because they pull off such an incredible achievement, it makes this. I'm going to put my head out and say that's the greatest album ever made. I'm not joking. You think I'm being facetious, don't you? I absolutely love this album. And because it's got jazz rock on there and it's got full out playing, that track, the what's it called again? The Who Are They? Jan Hammer's greatest keyboard solo. His tone, his approach is absolutely incredible. And the way he sets it up, there's so much tension. It's got beautiful tunes on. The tunes, on the whole, are somewhere in the sort of Stevie Wonder mold, but with a lot more jazz rock going on. So, we're done. I hope you enjoyed that. Oh, I seem to clear my chest shouting. I don't feel good now, I tell you. As I'm talking, I can feel my stomach's doing a bit of the old wobbliness. So I might have to go now. You know what I'm saying? You know, I didn't need to. You didn't need to tell them that, Andy. They probably don't know what you're talking about. But just move on. Move on. You probably will be moving on as fast as you can in a minute. Oh, this illness. It's one of those illnesses. It's like. It's got different chapters to it, you know. It's like different chapters. I haven't been terribly ill, but I've been pretty ill. Okay, we're done. Oh yes, before we go, somebody said this on the comments. Can't remember who it is. I was talking about Dave Greenslade, who was the keyboard player in what band was it? Was it Brian August? We talked about them, I believe, in Express or Brian August Trinity or something. And then he went on to form Greenslade, and he had the great Chris Farlow on vocals, and they did a tune called Gangsters. It was the theme tune to a TV show called Gangsters, and I have it here on this classic album here. You see, where is it? Gangsters. There. I was the Gangsters, Chris Farlow and Dave Greenslade. Oh, lovely. I'm going to have to go to the toilet now.